Welcome back. Now we've added the tick function to the character class. In this video, we're going to finish taking all the character code out of the while loop and putting it into the tick function. Then we're going to finally create a variable of the character type. Whenever we create a variable of a class type, we say that we created an instance of that class. Let's get started. So down here in the while loop, the last thing we need to move to the tick function of the character class is this code for drawing the character. Let's go ahead and copy this and scroll up to the tick function and paste it in just at the end here. Now again, we can reformat the document. On Windows, it's Shift-Alt-F, and on Mac, it's Shift-Option-F. And on Linux, it's Control-Shift-I. Now there's a couple things we need to change here. We're not using the night texture 2D, but rather the texture 2D variable called texture. So we'll go ahead and replace night with texture here. Now the dest rectangle uses night pause, but now our character class is using screen pause, so we can replace that here and here. And finally, in Draw Texture Pro, instead of night, we're going to draw the texture variable. Okay, so that finishes our tick function. Now all that's left is to remove all the unnecessary code from the main function. So we don't need our speed variable anymore, nor do we need the texture 2Ds or the animation variables, so I can highlight all of this code and delete it. Next, inside the while loop, we have all this input code. We moved all of this into the character class so we can highlight all of it and delete it as well. Now we still need to draw the map. That has nothing to do with the character, so that stays in the while loop. But just after that, we have all of the animation code, as well as code for drawing the character, so we're going to highlight all of this and delete it as well. Now all that's left in the while loop is drawing the texture for the map. So as you can see, the main function is cleaned up quite a bit, and all the character code is in the character class functions. And now for your challenge. You're going to create an instance of the character class. You do this in the same way that you create a variable of any other type. Do this just outside the while loop. Call this variable night. We're no longer using our old variable called night since we deleted it from the main function. Once you've created this instance of the character class, call setScreenPause. Pass in window width and window height for the function's arguments. Then, in the while loop, we're going to need to call the tick function. Make sure you call tick after drawing the texture for the map. If you call tick before, then we'll draw the texture of the character first, and then the map will be drawn on top of it, and we won't see the character. For this function, pass in getFrameTime, so tick will have a valid delta time each frame. Pause the video and do this now. Okay, so here in the main function, just outside the while loop, we're going to create a variable of type character. So we'll say character, and we're going to call this night. Now we need to call setScreenPause, so we're going to say night.setScreenPause, and this takes two integers. We're going to pass in window width and window height. Now the night variable has a valid screen pause value. Next, we need to call tick in the while loop. Just after drawTextureX, we're going to call night.tick. And for the delta time variable, we're going to pass in getFrameTime. Great job. Now, before we playtest this, there's one last thing we need to do. Notice in the tick function that we're now updating the worldPause variable. So we're no longer updating our mapPause variable. We need to update this every frame, and we're going to update it using the character's worldPause variable. Now let's talk about these position vectors for a moment, just so we understand the difference between each one. Let's start with screen pause. This is the vector that we use to draw the character to the screen. It's the coordinates of the upper left corner of the texture in relation to the upper left corner of the screen. This screen pause variable will never change because we're always going to draw the character to the middle of the screen, so we've stored this vector value for convenience. As far as the character's movement, every frame, we're going to update world pause. Now, world pause starts off at 0, 0. That's basically the upper left corner of the screen. Now, let's say in a single frame, we'd like to move down and to the right by 1 unit in the X and the Y. This would put our world pause at 1, 1. But we can't just move the screen down and to the right. What we have to do instead is move the map up and to the left. In other words, we need our map position to move in the opposite direction. So effectively, every frame, we're setting map pause equal to world pause scaled by -1, or flipped in the opposite direction. So all of the information is stored in world pause. Map pause is just derived from world pause. It's a calculated value. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to set map pause equal to the character's world pause times -1. So we can use vector to scale. Now the vector value we're going to use is the knight's world pause, which is a private variable, but remember, we created a public getter for this. So we're going to use knight.getWorldPause. And the second argument is the value to scale this by, and we're going to scale it by -1.f. So now each frame, we're getting the character's world pause vector and flipping it by multiplying it by -1, and this will move map pause in the opposite direction. So the character will stay in the middle of the screen and the map will move. Let's hit run and start debugging. So here we have our window and we're able to run around and everything looks great. Great job. So in summary, we finished the tick function and moved the rest of the character code into the tick function, including input, animation, and drawing code. We then created an instance of the character class and called setScreenPause, so the screenPause variable has a valid value, and then we called tick in the while loop, passing in getFrameTime for the delta time input parameter. Now we have a functional character class. Great job. I'll see you in the next video.